Hello, Northern Lights Publishing welcomes you to RoundTable 360 with your host and moderator, Joseph Carrabas. RoundTable 360 brings together people in the creative fields, dancers, thespians, poets, actors, musicians, authors, and others from across the globe in conversation about things that are relevant, irrelevant, serious, and fun. Today's session is Navigating and Redefining Creativity in a Post-AI World. What is art for, and what is the importance of the human element? With the rise of artificial intelligence and its deployment in generating imagery, music, writing, and more at fractional costs, it begs the question of where artists, young and old, fit into the future. Today's discussion is led by character, voice actor, narrator, and senior 3D artist Kyle Ouellette. Today's guests include philosopher and author Bry Willis, editor, publisher, and award-winning poet Clarabelle Murray Fields, and a host of others. Stay with us and enjoy. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Welcome for joining us on the Roundtable. This is the October edition of the Roundtable with several new faces. I'll let them introduce themselves to you. And tonight we're going to be hosted by Kyle Ouellette, voice actor and graphic artist extraordinaire, who's going to be leading us in a discussion on AI and the future of the arts. Kyle, wave your hand and take it away.
Hello, everybody. So for a very brief introduction, as Joseph said, my name is Kyle. I'm a 3D artist and voice actor, and I'm very transfixed by this topic of AI and art and creativity, what it means philosophically, practically, and all the above. And I'm really excited to talk with everybody tonight. So before we get into the meat and potatoes, I would love for everybody to get to introduce themselves. So why don't we start with Kenneth?
I have to unmute myself. Yeah, I'm Ken Ween. I'm a psychologist by training. I write, do economic and political consulting, write plays, poetry, novels, and have fun in my old age.
I don't know if we all have the same grid, so I guess I'll just call people out. Mr. Willis.
Yeah, this is my first meeting, as Joseph said. I am a philosopher, scholar, and in a past life, an economist and a statistician. I don't do that anymore. And I'm also writing fiction nowadays, speculative literary fiction mostly, as well as my philosophy nonfiction.
Awesome. Donna.
Hi. I write mysteries. I've wanted to do it since I was 10, and I'm very lucky to be doing it for real. I just finished a thriller 2 days ago, and my editors got it, and the title is Proof Positive. I'm hoping for an early release in the beginning of 2026, and I'm having fun.
Nice. Rick.
Hi, I'm a lawyer by day. I always wanted to be a writer, so I decided to finally start writing. I wrote a novel, and I'm looking for a publisher, which is extremely hard if you've never been published. So I began writing short stories a few years ago. So far, I've got 6 publications, and I'm still looking for an agent. That's me.
Nice. Amy.
Well, in my past life, I worked on the business side of the medical profession. And once my kids went off to college and beyond, I moved, and now I own a nature retreat and a honeybee farm. And I'm a published author in several books. And I'm still building my retreat, and it has 2 things, one for people with adversity and one for creatives like you.
That's fascinating. Clarabelle.
Yes, hello everybody. So I'm a writer and an editor. I mostly write a lot of poetry, speculative poetry. I do dabble in longer work as well. I usually write what I describe as myth-tinged or mythological sci-fi. So I like to pull motifs and themes from ancient myth and weave them in with sci-fi, some fantasy, a little bit of horror. But I would say sci-fi is my very favorite genre to both read and to write. So AI is an up and coming interest of mine. So I'm really excited about this discussion tonight.
Awesome. Mr. Helena.
How's it going? My name is Matt Mays. Professionally, I go by Mythic Matt Mays. Helena is not my alias. That's my wife, whose name has found her way into this Zoom meeting. But all that aside, I'm a mythical artist. I do visual art. I'm a speaker. I'm also a creative educator, and I'm passionate about. Oh, thank you for that. Passionate about bringing out the stories within us, and not just in a theoretical way, but in a real way, and living the myths that exist inside of us and around us.
This is going to be a great conversation. Teresa.
I'm Teresa Velarde. I am an author, speaker, coach, a potter, and a publisher. I help people get their stories told in books, and I have a series that I'm working on called the Daily Gift Book Series, and several of the people that you see here are part of that, including Joseph and Amy. Yeah, those two. And I'm just really loving what I do, giving an opportunity for people who are creatives, whether they're writers or artists, to have their stories told in books.
Fantastic. And last but certainly not least, John.
Hey, I'm John. I'm a 3D artist, photographer, and graphic designer. Been doing that for about 20 years or so. Currently looking for full-time employment, but enjoying learning new things.
Yes, your new Blender updates are always one of the highlights seeing in LinkedIn and Instagram. So excited to see what you're working on.
Yeah, just some creativity between the ads.
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for introducing yourselves. So we have a lot to talk about. I think this is going to be a great group. I don't normally like rules for these types of discussions because I want it to be organic and I want it to be honest and true. But a few ground rules, we are all friends here. So like, feel free to be honest, be curious, and don't be afraid to challenge an idea if you have something that is, maybe contradictory to what somebody else says. I think we should all, respect the creative process of working through this topic, and trust that we are all friends and we are all here in the spirit of creativity and collaboration. And as Joseph mentioned, to avoid too much crosstalk with delays and internet connection and all that, do signal, try not to pounce. And if something is just like compelling you to like rip off your skin like a werewolf, then just to express yourself in the visuals, and we'll get to you. So to start us off, when talking about this ever-present ghoul, this phantom living in our current modern day society of artificial intelligence or generative AI, I think it's important as we get into this discussion to define our terms. So the definition, I looked this up. Of course, AI told me what this was, so who knows? Generative AI works by using machine learning models, particularly deep learning algorithms, to analyze large amounts of data and learn patterns. Once trained, these models can create new content, such as text, images, or audio, based on user prompts by generating outputs that resemble the data they were trained on. So that's what it does. So if that's what it is, is in about 250 characters, what then is art? What does art mean? And I'll just to get this started, I'll throw this at Matt.
Whew. In 250 characters?
Yeah. Artists, I think creativity thrives in a cage.
Well, and you have to realize you're asking someone I heavily advocate for the human creativity, so that's kind of my bias. But I would also say that it's something that if it enables you to express your ideas in ways that would take you a long time to do otherwise. Like I use it for a number of different things. I use it for business purposes rather than using it to create art, right? And I remember when it was first getting really popular and people were like creating all these AI images and all that stuff. I'm trying to, I want to protect my craft, right? Like, I don't want anyone to be able to feed my art into a machine and replicate my art. So um, there's a website if you guys are familiar, DeviantArt, if you're familiar with it, it's a huge artist network, and they did something really extraordinary where all this is happening. Well, first they tried to create their own AI image engine, right? And the entire community was it was in an uproar. They were like, "How could you do this? How could you? Oh my God! Like this is so bad." And so they listened and they responded and say, "Hey, we heard you, and this is what we did. Every new deviation is a piece of artwork that's uploaded to the site has a tick box, no AI, which means that neither their engine nor any other engine can use that piece of artwork in an AI created image." So of course, what I did, I uploaded every single piece of artwork that I have to DeviantArt for that specific purpose. So yeah, I take that image creation protection and license, and frankly ownership is a big word at the center here for me, very, very seriously.
That's I want to jump off that and stay on the topic of like sort of let's define what art means. And I think ownership is an interesting part of that because I think part of the artistic process is how the creation of art affects the artist and how letting that go and having art be experienced by others and the part of their ownership and experiencing it is a part of the artistic process. Mr. Willis, is it Bry?
It's Bry, yeah.
Right. You mentioned that you're a philosopher. Give us your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so my background, just to set the groundwork here, is I was a musician, professional musician in the 80s, 90s, and I was also became a statistician, economist, and was working with AI 3.0. Now we're in AI 4.0, as you guys probably know, and so it's not all scary to me, right? I've been in from the back end and from the front end. So from an art perspective, I think as like Marcel Duchamp would prove, is anything you want to be art, right? I don't think there's any limitations. I could put anything in a frame and call it art, or in the bathroom, right? It doesn't matter. And separately, art is an aesthetic, whether it's music or visual art or written art. And I'll be a little bit unorthodox here, but probably 90% of art, it doesn't really meet most aesthetics, right? Most people aren't a Rodin or somebody like that, right? It's kind of, I don't want to get into a philosophical conversation, but there's high art and low art. Most of it's low art, right? Most of it's not Shakespeare. Most of it's I don't want to put out a name out there because somebody might like that person. But anyway, that's really where I'm coming from. In a lot of what AI does for art is like agency art. Like who cares? Like let them make some graphics or something for some flyers. Don't care. But if you're using it to produce something that's supposed to be high art and it's really derivative, that's sort of philosophically different. Although I would argue that as humans, everything we do is derivative. And it's just, we have a better understanding of how AI works, like mathematically. And so we set it to a different standard, despite the fact that we come into the world empty. We come in as a bag of jeans and we learn what we learn and we're inspired by what we're inspired by, and then produce what we call art. And I'd argue that qualitatively AI actually isn't substantially different. And we could make a humanist argument. I won't go there, but anyway, but really the only limitations of AI, or the biggest limitations now, is just that we set up criteria for human versus non-human, and of course it's never gonna pass that. It's never gonna meet that that requirement. But I would argue, well, I heard the other day that like something like 50% of all the new information on the internet now that's not art specifically, is now AI generated. So the genie's sort of out of the bottle there as well.
Interesting. I definitely want to circle back around to qualitatively difference between the human artistic creation and generative AI. But Joe, you asked for a signal. You got it. Sorry, I caught you. I caught you off guard.
Okay, Claire, I'm going to let you go first because you had a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So I just dropped my first thoughts in the chat. It was just off the top of my head. I think to me, something that is really essential to art and defining art is intentionality. That there is a purpose, there's a uniquely human intent of trying to cause or generate emotions or some kind of reaction in an audience. And I feel like that's something that it really separates AI generated material from human art, is that intentionality, the emotion and purpose that we put into it. It's a way of trying to communicate to each other and to other humans. At least those are my initial thoughts off the top of my head. I think intentionality is what I would underscore there for me personally.
Yeah.
Clarabelle, do you think that you can put emotion into AI art?
That's a good question. Are you speaking in terms of maybe somebody who programs the AI or the AI itself, or?
Well, so like if you're creating a poem or a piece of or painting or pottery or whatever you're doing, your emotions go into it.
It cut out a little bit there for me. I don't know if it was the same for everyone else. I couldn't hear the last thing you said.
Yeah, she looks like she's glitching.
Yeah, it seems like there's a little bit of a lag.
Amy, turn off your video.
Wow.
I know where she is. I think we've gone through this before, where their internet connection can sometimes be fairly spotty. While she's reconnecting, I want to stick with this topic of intentionality and emotion, and especially with your background in mythology and science fiction. I think this is an interesting springboard. At first I thought about coming at this with a totally like neutral perspective, but I thought that would be stifling. I think for me, art, like with a purpose of art, is a celebration of the human soul, and it's a perspective. And it's a sort of expression of your lived experiences. And in relation to myths, I think myths are one of the, obviously one of our most ancient art forms in storytelling, of taking the world around us and providing an explanation and perspective that is a story that remains, as J.R.R. Tolkien said, myths weren't necessarily stories, but seeds of truth. They're ancient seeds of truth that were forgotten. Can generative AI be inspired by the world around it? Or is it just giving us the superficial features of what we're asking for it?
Yeah.
And this is an open question for everyone.
So can I answer? So the AI itself has no intentionality, but as the prompter, I can give it that intention and say, give me a cartoon about animals based on Hamlet, and we all probably know what that is, and that was done by humans. So I could do something similar to that in AI. So therefore, I am the human spark or whomever. So it doesn't need to, on its own sort of come up with an idea. But if I give a seed of an idea, does that then make that not art? So I had a mate of mine a long time ago who did not like Warhol because his art was drugs inspired, therefore it disqualified. I think that's kind of, we're in the same area there to disqualify where the idea comes from. Or John Lennon, I guess I could use because I'm that old too. So
I mean, if I drive a forklift into a gym and I lift 400 pounds, am I a weightlifter?
Well, that's language, though. I don't.
I'm going to jump in here for a second. One thing that I have not heard in discussion here or elsewhere is the fact that what people are calling AI now is not intelligence.
None. No.
It's really able to scan a vast amount of information and find similarities and say, okay, this and this and this and this and this, okay, fine. That's not, you're using the word inspired, which originally, its original form meant breathed out by God. And that's where we have our soul, if you will. That's where we have our emotional basis. And the example that I use is flying over Greenland and seeing the reflection off the icebergs over the ice cap. I was transfixed for 400 miles just looking out the window. And I got so many stories out of that. AI, I have trouble calling it AI because it is not a learning mechanism which can then take separate pieces of information, attach them together, and come up with new information. I read a lot of science journals, and they're constantly saying, AI has discovered the latest cancer thing. No, what AI did was look at a bunch of cancer patients, millions of them, and say, wow, I noticed this cell happens. Therefore, maybe there's a link. Boom. That's not being creative. That's just doing things faster than humans can do. And for what it's worth, I also want to point out that in my previous life, I owned an international company that developed an AI protocol. But very specifically, our system learned as children learn. That was its big thing. It actually learned by interacting with people, questioning what they were doing, and then taking the information and getting new information from it, getting new knowledge, literally new knowledge. It's still in use in a lot of places. At least that's what my royalty checks say. But it's important to realize what is everyone is saying is generative AI. No, that's just merely replication of existing information. There is no soul. There is no emotion. There is no spirit in it. It is algorithmic. It does not learn. It does not grow. It cannot synthesize. I'll be quiet now.
So yeah, bouncing off that, Rick, go ahead. You had your first hand up.
Okay, well, I agree with Joseph. We had a similar discussion a year ago about AI. AI is not intelligent. I can tell you as a lawyer, lawyers who use AI to write briefs come out with the stupidest, easiest to destroy briefs possible. And not even a first-year law student, unless he was a criminal and thought he can get away with, plagiarism and making, no, not plagiarism, making things up, would not do that. It's not intelligent. It's a tool, though. It's a really, really important tool that I think humans should use. Whether they should use it for art or not, I guess is maybe the question we're discussing. I absolutely agree that all art is derivative. Absolutely. I also like having mythology as some of my contexts and subplots or whatever. And that's all by definition derivative. I think that when we talk about art, we also talk about entertainment. Art can be entertainment, but not all entertainment is necessarily art, but maybe it is if it's done by humans, because it is humans communicating with each other on an emotional level. To me, the most easiest example of AI being proper entertainment in an art field is, computer graphics for movies. I really like the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and all the art had to be done by hand, and they put a lot of work into that. If I had seen Who Framed Roger Rabbit with all the art done by AI, that would not have offended me in the slightest. I would have been just as entertained and just as happy. So those are my thoughts, but not knowing much more about AI, I don't have much more to say.
And Matt, your response.
I think we're circling around this question of the importance, the relevance, and the specialness of humans, human creativity, and specifically the individual. And we're looking at a snapshot in time right now with this AI technology. But if we look back at if we like, if we look at our lives, we look at how often we have used technology to replace functions that we've, that we've had to do. Oh, we can do it this much faster or this much better. It's more efficient with technology. What that does is it actually can erode our human capacity. So when we're saying, can we do it as well as AI? I think the better question is, are we actually working to our own capacity as humans, right? So you're asking a question from being stunted, from using, I mean, we can use it to enhance our capabilities in many different ways. And I think that's a purpose of technology, is to be able to do something beyond our physical limits. Like I can't physically produce a Zoom room right here. We had to be able to use technology in order to do that, and it allows us to expand beyond what having to meet in a physical location. But at the same time, I was talking with a good friend about this today. And he talked about a friend who's like, oh, why go and meet people? Like, you can just meet each other virtually. And the point is, going and meeting someone in person has a different resonance than it does over a virtual room. No offense here. I know we're all gathered virtually, but it doesn't have the same resonance. You're not going to be able to have the same interaction as actually being there with that person, right? So is this tension between the physical effort, the physical doing, which I would argue is much more fulfilling and rewarding in the long run, that as much as we can do ourselves, versus taking an easy route with technology, and frankly, not achieving the same result. I mean, I can look at a piece of AI generated art and, some of you might agree with me, maybe not, but it looks oftentimes a little too pristine.
Yeah.
And I think there is such thing where it's just like just a little bit too, where you can tell that it's artificial, and that kind of ruins the magic. And this is a thing in films too, coming from animation school, right? It's that that suspension of disbelief, right? And there's I'm trying to remember there's this phenomenon where when you're looking at an animated character, or say, this carries over like porcelain dolls, or why people are scared of clowns or whatever like that, where it's close enough to human likeness, but just not quite there.
Yeah,
right?
Claire's right.
Where
The
you can
uncanny valley.
yeah, uncanny valley. Yeah, thank you. Where you can just tell subconsciously, like, we're wired to know what human faces look like to the nth. We've evolved this way over thousands and thousands, well, really, over a time evolution as like bipedal species. And then, yeah, you can just tell, like, I can't quite put my finger on it, but it's just not quite right, right? And you can tell when something has been human created. You can tell when something has that special touch to it. Um, and it's because it's not perfect, right? That's a very important quality to it, is that you can tell that some effort, that this person put themselves into that, and you can feel it. Like the art being a mirror between two people, between the creator and the person experiencing it.
Yeah, I definitely want us to talk more about the uncanny valley and the professional practices or practicability of understanding AI. But Bri, you have your hand up.
So I just wanted to talk, actually, as Rick was talking about lawyers and being not a very good example, but I'd ask us to look at, we probably all remember what AI art looked like 2 years ago and now, and it's easily 10 times better, which if I could project that forward, then if we're another 10 times better in a year or two, right? So that was point one, is it may not be ready now, but that's not the point. And I don't want to get into the minutia. There are other aspects beyond that. I was going to mention the uncanny valley as well. But even a couple of years ago, there was some AI art submitted to contest. It won, discovered that it was AI art. No, it's AI, so it's disqualified. So it was judged by humans as being better. And then, oh, but we don't like the source, and so it got its ribbon removed, right? So that kind of throws a little bit of shadow on I can tell the difference, and I can tell the difference in too, but that's now. Like in a year, in 2 years, and I have got plenty of my friends that look at the memes that happen on social media. It's like, dude, that's not real. Cats don't carry guns or whatever, and so there's going to be a point, and this isn't art, but it's in the visual space, right? So it's interpretive.
But you know what that's talking about, right? It makes me wonder if Rick should be shifting his law practice to defending AI because they're going to be prejudiced and bigoted, and that's no good. You can't. We don't. Hey, we're not going to let the Irish. No AI. Okay, let the Irish in, but no AI.
Well, I mean, I think this is a part of, I think, professional practicalities and understanding AI as artists who work within the reality of, a capitalist socioeconomic society where we're going to have to make ends meet somehow, and we have certain creative tools, and we're going to have to try to get through it. And I think part of that, as you mentioned, Bri, like, and I think you're right, like there is a gap in some people in the population's ability to identify artificially generated imagery, video, music, and it doesn't quite click. I think part of that has to do with media literacy, which we can dive more deeply into. But the uncanny valley, the ability to identify stuff, I think is something that needs to be taught versus just assuming. I think there is something in all of us inherent that is able to identify, what is not human. But in terms of identifying what is not necessarily human created, I think is an extra level of observational particularity that we don't necessarily all have trained in us. And Amy, you have your hand up.
So am I talking okay this time?
Yeah, we can hear you
All
loud
right,
and clear.
cool. All right, so when I worked in medical simulation, I'm not sure if that falls under the category of AI because this was quite some.
Oh no. The abyss.
Yeah, you're breaking up a
So
little bit.
I worked in. Can you guys hear me?
This is
No.
the uncanny valley. She's fallen into the Zoom uncanny valley.
Oh no.
She may want to try her phone in for the audio part and not have to worry about the internet connection.
Yep.
Yeah, so we'll come back to Amy's thoughts. Really briefly, I do want to highlight in our discussions about how AI can be useful, right? Because we're talking about, like, I think AI as a tool, it's easy to be all doom and gloom about the philosophical implications of artists being phased out, the idea of media literacy dying. But in terms of, very briefly, my own personal experience as a 3D artist, and John can speak to this, there's actually a lot of really small, useful cases for artificial, not intelligence, as Joseph has been talking about, but the ability for it to extrapolate information based on what it's being given. So for in 3D, we use it a lot to save on render time, where we can render out an architectural visualization at much lower pixel resolution and just tell the model to upscale it without having to spend hours and hours of rendering it at high fidelity. Or image patching, where I can tell Photoshop, I can select an area and tell it, generate, this buildings on the horizon and put birds flying off in the distance. And it can fill in those little patches. And that helps save me time. Or tweening, where I can, render a first frame and a last frame and ask it to sort of like render the frames between. So there are useful, I think, tools for AI. Does anybody else, whether it's in writing or poetry or film or animation, have any other use cases in the recent time where they've been able to use AI as a useful tool?
Yeah, that's actually what I was talking about
Perfect.
is in in medical simulation, we were able to merge real patient like life scenarios, like whatever is recorded for patients, like say in the emergency room, all the different monitors, and then we would take them and merge them with either um,
It's more and more tragic as it keeps happening.
Yeah, you're still cutting out. We
It's
can't
got to
hear
be
you,
trying to do the video at the same
unfortunately.
time. That's
Isn't it fascinating that she gets to this climax point and it cuts out?
it's almost on purpose.
Affected
The
here.
conspiracy, the computer is trying to stop her.
Yeah,
John, what were you
Skynet.
saying?
Yeah, like Kyle said, that the AI in the tools that I use are just one more, brush in the toolkit, to fix things, to iterate on stuff, make tweaks, enhance. I use it a lot to explore ideas, and I do make a point to not tell it to focus on certain authors or designers and stuff like that. It's the idea in my head that I want to see done, and I tell it, since we have a background in photography, I tell it to use this lens, this camera, things that I don't have, this lighting setup for like certain studio lights, and then have it create this idea, and then I'll tweak it. I'll ask it to change this, that, this, and from there I'll go and I'll recreate it. The last two projects that I've done, um, you've seen them on LinkedIn, Kyle, the book cover
Mhm.
and that thing with the crystals. Both of those started out as ideas in Midjourney, where I'll
Mhm.
just keep trying these different ideas, change these colors, try this camera distance and stuff like that. And then finally, I'll find something that's kind of working, and I'll take a bunch of those different um, renders that it gave me, bring those into Photoshop, piece together what I like, and say, all right, how do I make this now? So it definitely helps cut down on the time it takes to just go through stock photo websites. And I realized that the idea of like the stock photo uh, business is being gutted by this. Um, but it lets me get the idea that I want on in front of me quicker because for some of the stuff for the book that I did for Joseph, I was at a camp with no electricity and I had my field notes book and a pencil. I made sketches of all these little chapter illustrations I needed to do, and I went and took those and see what worked and used Midjourney to try and find out what color combinations work best and stuff like that. And then you go and make them in 3D, which is what you do in the end. So it's like it helps me in delivering a better quality product in the end because I was able to take that R&D time, compress it quite a bit, and hone in on an idea that I liked. Um, so I hate to play devil's advocate towards it, but it is useful to an artist who is trying to get their work done, um, for clients that have certain like budget restraints or time restraints, or you yourself want to get something done. I'm in the middle of a course for learning Blender, and every week we get a challenge. And so I'm like, all right, I got some ideas. I know 3D. So the making stuff isn't a problem, but we have a compressed time. I'm learning some software that I've never touched before. I really want to push myself to try something different. Let me try some ideas real quick, and I'll do that. I'll type in some ideas, and because I know how to describe the exact things that I want, it's able to give me a much more refined uh, result. Like I know you guys are on LinkedIn all the time, and you see those garbage AI illustrations by other people. Or, they look trash, like from 3 years ago. But I've seen stuff that looks like professional, like photographers and artists and stuff like that. They look very impressive, and it sucks because it's like saying like the person who would paint a painting is just the person who knows how to sculpt marble. It's like they're two different tools. You're getting the art in the end. Someone's putting their ideas onto paper that with a medium they didn't know how to paint, they know how to sculpt. They're using their own tool that they're given. It's uh at the end of the day, it lets someone who is either not creative or is creative and wants to really expand their skill set to try new things, to use that tool to explore ideas, to research what their ideas look like in a different format, and up to them to take it and make it their own by recreating it.
Nice. Yeah, yeah. Excellent analysis. Clara, and then Kenneth.
Yeah, so okay, I am unmuted. I just wanted to make sure. So John, I actually want to say I appreciated you talking about using AI as a tool, as a creative, because that's an area where I myself am still trying to figure out exactly where AI fits in to the creative process. And I have some of my friends who are writers do use AI as a tool. And I guess I have been struggling myself philosophically with where those boundaries are of when is AI a tool and when does it become a replacement for my own creativity. Um, so I was wondering what other creators' thoughts were on that and how they felt philosophically, and maybe you could speak more to how you feel about that yourself as a creator. Because something that I'm afraid of falling into myself is a suspicion or an unnecessary fear of new technology that could be helpful as a tool. Because I feel like every time there are advances and new technology is introduced, there's usually a lot of suspicion. Like once upon a time when photography was new, people decried photography and said it's going to put painters out of work, it's going to ruin painting, there's going to be no need for this anymore. And now photography is seen as an art form unto itself. So I would love to hear more from other creatives about how they feel about AI as a tool for their own work.
Can I, I'm very curious as to how AI fits into a writer's workflow because I feel like you're just literally creating the things you're supposed to be typing or writing. So it's like, what are you asking it to pull from for ideas? Because you're clearly telling it what you think you want to hear. So where is that?
Yeah. Do you want me
I,
to? I can
Yeah,
tell you
go.
at least what I know some of my friends have used it for is some of them do use it to generate outlines, which I personally feel iffy about, but that's their own, if that's what they're comfortable doing, that's their own work. Some of them use it as a thesaurus or as kind of a springboard for ideas where they'll bounce ideas off of it. They'll use it to generate names. Like, let's say if they're writing a fantasy novel, they'll use it as a name generator. So that's what I've seen personally. But I guess I'm still scared of crossing that line from AI being a useful tool in your back pocket for me personally to being something that is just effectively replacing work that I should be doing or could be doing myself.
Very quick personal anecdote. I find the idea of using AI to generate names repulsive. But that's just my personal
It's
take.
weird.
Kenneth, and then I want to get Donna's take. Matt, I just want to go from Kenneth to Donna, then back to Matt.
Well, first of all, I guess I want to throw, I have always a surprise at how much Clarabelle and I were kind of in the same framework. Um, my question is, how is AI going to change me?
Mm.
Okay. When people started studying light, it changed painting. Okay. And now, how does AI change the way we study and think about language? That's that's the real question for me. Do I use AI to help me? Yeah, I have. Isn't it wonderful? When I'm writing a poem and I need something that rhymes but has three syllables that goes dee dee da, I can go into it. I can go in and look for the thesaurus and then I can get all kinds of things. And wow, it's done. And so it saves me hours of, but that's not changing me. That's a tool. But when does it change me? When does it actually make me think about something differently? And it's not just AI, it's I, period. For example, I was writing one book. I don't speak Spanish, so I wrote the entire thing in English, but it had a lot of Spanish in it. And when I went to hire a translator to help me with it, he said to me, but wait a minute, you're having this conversation take place in Argentina, and this one's taking place in Puerto Rico. They're different Spanish. Which, of course, AI would have told me that. Or I could add. So AI is a wonderful tool in that way that it can expand our knowledge and stuff. But is it going to change me? Is it going to make me think about how I think about language different? Right now, when I write, my most typical thing is when I'm writing is I have a drum right next to me, and I will bang on the drum as I'm writing to catch the rhythm of the words. And that's how I process it. Is if I have AI, can I now ask the AI to play different rhythms? Sure, I can. And is that going to change how I write? Is that going to change how I use language? These are the questions I'm interested in. How's AI going to change me as the artist? And that's enough, so I'll shut up.
No, I think it's very thought-provoking. We don't have enough time for me to go into this topic, but I think it's worth chewing on the idea of like how it will change you to think about how the process of creating art changes the artist. The idea that the artist that starts an artistic endeavor is not the same artist on the other side of the book or painting or sonnet that they make. But Donna, I want to make sure we get to your thoughts.
Hi. I could tell you all the things that I don't like about it already. I'm not really a big fan, but the one thing that I think is a shame if it's happening is the mental connection that happens between an author's work and a reader, in my case. There was an example that I always use about John Gardner describing someone watching it snow, standing in the doorway of a diner, watching the snow. And I read that and I thought, wow, that's what I think when I'm watching it snow. And so right then my brain and John Gardner's were in sync and talking about something universal. And once in a while with my books, somebody will say to me the same sort of thing. It resonated to them in that way. That I think would be a horrible loss if AI interfered with it.
I agree with that. Matt. You're muted, sir.
Thank you. Speaking to Kenneth's question, and I want to be really blunt here on just the downstream effects of AI and image creation in relation to artists is one, this is not a new thing, and it's building on top of a number of different factors which have made it harder and harder and harder for artists to be able. It's like, why is it that we have to justify our making a living off of our craft? And then we have all these different factors, right? So make no mistake, like AI creates these images based on existing images that artists have created that have been on the internet. People who, many of it, the ones who are raising a storm about it, they're the ones who actually are endeavoring to make a living off of it, right? So when you take that away, then not only does it take away their livelihood, but it also decreases the amount of net total visual art created by humans on the internet, which then decreases the amount of of images that AI can use in order to create its images. So really, it's feeding on itself, you see. And so if you follow that logic all the way down, and then think about that discouraging artists from then creating. I mean, like I don't know how many of you hear about this, like artists actually giving up on their craft, like getting to a point where it is just so damn difficult to make a living off of it that you just quit and you do something else. And so then that less art then means less AI art, which then it's like, well, what the hell? Like, where does the art go, right? And what's interesting to me as a visual artist, the people who have been the biggest supporters of my art have been the ones who like they're creative in some capacity themselves, right? Which means they appreciate the creative process. So it's a two-way thing. Like you are a creator and you also appreciate art. Go figure, right? So we want more of that. We want more of that art in the world. Now, what I would say is the ideal relationship between AI and humans is like I keep going back to Tony Stark and Jarvis, right? I see some of you nodding your heads. Like, so he's for those who aren't familiar, Iron Man. He is he's the engineer, he's the genius, he's the one who is coming up with the ideas, the direction. He's the sovereign agent, right? And Jarvis is his companion. It's his AI companion, helps flesh the things out and make them real. So expands his capabilities to be able to do more than he could just do with his two hands, right? But no, make no mistake, he is the creative genius, right? So that's to me, that's the ideal balance.
Right.
If we say
AI as a
that's
helpful
the harm.
assistant. I think, unfortunately,
Yes.
the motivations of the people creating it, and they've said this as much, this is not conjecture, they want to replace human effort and labor. They've said so. So, I mean, then, now we have a conflict of motivations of Tony Stark versus someone like Sam Altman, who we could spend 2 hours
Yeah.
talking about. But we've got Bry, John, and Joseph, and we're running low on time.
Okay. Yeah. So I actually wanted to pick up on Claire's thing. She made the remark about the cameras, which is correct. But if you go back, so Plato actually, in one of his dialogues with Socrates and Phaedrus, had talked about written language ruining memory, right? So this goes back thousands and thousands of years that people complain about the next thing. So I just wanted to set that up. But I do want to talk about um, so when I use AI, it's as an assistant. And I just put together a book cover, for example, the other day. I did it in Illustrator. But I said, hey, ChatGPT, I want to do this. How do I do it? And I would go into I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted, degrade the letters, or I want to do this, and it would explain to me how to do it. And in the old days, I'd go to Google, or in the older days, I'd go to Alta Vista, but I would find the information, and this just makes it quicker for me. So there's no like artistic thing that's missing there. But I do want to actually ask a question to the artist, because I am not a visual artist. I have eyes. That's as far as it goes, right? And so when I try to create something with Midjourney, I think Matt already mentioned Midjourney, I can never get what I want. I can't get Midjourney to make what I want. It'll get close and somebody said, well, that's great. It's like, yeah, but that's not what was in my head. So I don't even know how to get exactly what's in my head, where if I were an artist, I'm guessing I could get that. So there's already a delta there that for me, I have to deal with good enough, right? AI, the output is good enough. But then the last sort of bit is one of the things that I lean on as a writer is AI as an alpha reader, as a beta reader, right? And so I'll take the manuscript and I'll feed it in. And so before I bother humans, right? Because I'm going to bother the humans, but before I do, it's like, how is this? This is what I'm trying to say. Is it doing what I want it to do? Yes, no, blah, blah, blah. So that I use it as a feedback tool, because people would get tired of me ringing them up every 30 seconds, right, as I just finish another paragraph. And so that's what it allows me to do. And at the end, it goes off to the humans and the beta readers and the editors, and they do their thing, but I spare them a lot of the sausage making, right, in the background. And so anyway, so that's kind of my main writing use case, is that. and I guess upfront ideation. Like I'm a literary writer, so I'm not a genre writer. And so it's very philosophical. And so I'll have the hours of conversation. Hey, I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking of that. Has anybody else done it? Because I don't want it if somebody else has done it. If somebody else has done it, is it different enough? And I know originality doesn't matter. It's actually not all important. If you look at what's out on the market, that I think proves my point, and what sells. But that's not what I want. I want, I want to sell. Sell's not even the word. I want to write what I want to write, and I want it to be in a space that's unoccupied. Right.
Let me jump in here for a second. Make note of the one thing that Bry has given us a wonderful gift. He's told us that literature can be AI written. It doesn't matter. Also, for everybody here and whoever's going to be watching, we're at the half-hour mark. This is one heck of a conversation. I'd love to keep it going to the full hour. If you folks need to drop off, please do so. We thank you for the time you've given us. I'm going to keep the session running until the hour comes up, and do what you need to do. Remember, we love you, and it wasn't an AI saying that. Thank you.
Yeah, I actually want to send it to Teresa. You have a very thoughtful hand color that blended into the background, and so I totally missed you, but we've not heard from you yet, so I want to give you the floor.
Thank you. So I look at this in two different directions. First of all, my art form, the medium that I use is clay. AI can't touch me. Okay, that's from that standpoint. AI cannot touch me. You have to have your hands physically on the element in order to be able to create the art that comes from the process. So that being said, on the other side of the coin is my position as a publisher and a writer myself. And where I use AI is simply when I'm putting books together, and I ask, like this collaborative effort that I'm doing with the Daily Gift book series, I'll ask people for a 50-word bio to go in the book with their piece. And I sometimes will get a book, like 125 words. I've had people send me bios that are 2 pages long, and I'm like, I really don't want to go through this, editing it down. And I will go into AI and say, I need this to be 50 words. Please keep the author's voice and give me a 50-word bio that concisely represents this person. And I usually get, for the most part, I get something that's good. It's a time saver for me with stuff like that. I will never use it to change anything that someone has written as an editor. I will never use it for that because I don't believe that it can actually capture. The biggest thing for me is having your voice and I'm sure people who are poets and people who write, they want their voice to be heard in whatever it is that they put out there. And I think that AI, without the proper direction, can really what's the word? Junk up. I'll say junk up the work of somebody who's worked really hard and who's been inspired to put those words on the page. And I don't think I have any right to put it through a tool that is going to completely uncover, turn that upside down. And that's just where I stand with that.
Yeah, I think that's to briefly bounce off of that. Something that you're bringing up, which I hadn't really considered before, is the sort of professional perspective of, I think, someone who takes pride in their art, and the idea that, like, especially as like an editor, you wouldn't want an AI to edit someone's work because if, like for example, like what Rick was talking about with like a lawyer's briefs, if there's a mistake in there and they're claiming it's their work, it's, if you're an artist, I think if you feel inspired and compelled, which I think most artists who are inspired, they want to make something true, right? They want to make something that is from their experience.
Exactly.
And if it's not that, then they don't want it anyway. But to your point, like the idea of having it eliminate busy work, things that you don't want to do, like that is totally a great use of this technological, revolution.
Yeah.
So I think your perspective on, the ownership of the work is fascinating and very thought-provoking. John and Kenneth have been in the wings, unless Joseph has another thought.
Yeah, I'm trying to think back to Clarabelle's question towards me, but the specifics of it. But one of the names that popped into my head about for an artist that I could best equate to the AI argument is David Carson, who's a graphic artist. So he's creating the actual medium. He takes tears images from newspapers, magazines, stuff like that, and creates his own art from that. He didn't take the photos that are in the images that he used. So what makes his art his? Is it because he transformed it enough to be his, or is it because he asked everyone, "Can I use this? Can I use that? Can I use this for my final piece?" In the right hands, AI is the same thing. It's taking inspiration that you ask from it or see and giving you what you want in the end. You didn't do the work looking through thousands of magazines, but in the end, you're doing the same thing. Um, when it's used for things like writing, that I find it really crazy because you're literally that's your job is to have your ideas on the paper, you know? And if you can't think of anything, yeah, go to a library or get a thesaurus. So I feel like in the right hands of an artist, it is the tool of like a stock photography website, or it's me taking my camera and going out, but I don't have the lens and I can't spend $5,000 on the lens. I'm going to say, hey, give me a picture of foliage at a macro level and whatever. I'll give it all the details I want to take, put it in paper because I know put it in the prompt and create that image. The only thing that was lost is me buying an expensive lens, which eventually I'll probably get anyway if I use it that much, Um, but I think Adam Savage said it best, is that could AI write Lord of the Rings if Lord of the Rings never existed? Like it's just not a creative thing unless you yourself are creative, which is why you see that slop, why you see that uncanny valley stuff. So in the hands of artists, it's a great tool. Where there needs to be walls put up is with licensing, with the amount of where data centers and stuff go like that. Like when companies start laying off thousands of people because they're just they're thinking of the prospect of what they can save down the line of what's not there yet. That's where like it needs to be regulated quite a bit more is in how it's used. Because right now we're in the Wild West period where you can just do anything with it. You pay $60, you have free license to use it for whatever you want, and that's disgusting because people will just literally say, make me like H.R. Geiger style artwork and I'll slap that and start selling it. That's where there needs to be like rules.
Yeah. Kenneth, and then Teresa, and then Matt.
Yeah. Okay. I was going to say one thing, and then Teresa spoke, and I was immediately reacting to that. So let me start with that. Right now, you're telling me AI can't sculpt, but I'm going to tell you that it probably can and certainly will be able to. And therein lies what's really important here, because all it takes for the AI to sculpt is to put robotic hands and program them to move, and you'll get a product. You're shaking your head because you think because you're already reacting to what is the bottom line here. So let me tell you about my roommate in college. Okay, he was brilliant. He went on to be an astrophysicist at a major university. But he came back in our senior year, and I have to tell you, he had his room. We had a suite, and his room, he had it soundproofed. He slept in the closet because in his room he had a grand piano, and it took up most of the room. And Cappy, that was his name, loved to play the piano. Senior year, he comes back. He has spent the entire summer in Paris. studying piano. And he calls me in and he says, Ken, listen to this. And he plays quite nicely, quite well. And he said to me, what do you think? And I said, Cappy, it's wonderful. Technically, you're great. But I have to tell you, you don't have the soul of a pianist. And it doesn't sound like there's soul there. And he looked at me, tears welling in his eyes. And he said, that's what my teacher in Paris said. Well, I was glad to have my taste validated, but much more to the point is, yes, we can have AI generate books that will sell. They'll probably sell better than my books sell. Because they will be the common denominator. There is a difference between what is the Mythwelt of people coming together and the Artwelt, the creative world, the Praxiswelt, the world in which we create the meaningful. And I think, Teresa, that's why you're right and you're wrong. Because I probably will see in our lifetime a thing where people will go into a thing in a mall, a booth, just like now they can go in and get their photos taken and have all kinds of backgrounds and things done, where they will get a bust sculpted of them. And it will be a damn good bust of them. It just will lack the heart, the soul of art. And I think that's what really is the question, is how do we find a way to keep that soul there? And I think that's what we need one of the many things we need to be talking about.
Yeah, Teresa, your immediate response.
I agree that well, right now, I mean, I can take a piece of my pottery, and if I wanted to duplicate it, I don't have to sit at the wheel. There are molds to do that and whatnot. But the soul piece is actually the missing part of the whole thing. For me, making pottery is not just a physical art. It's a very spiritual experience for me, and it's something that everybody who has a piece of my work can feel the fact that that was made with care, and it was made with a God-given talent that nobody makes the same pots as I do. And just the same way that the potter is sitting at a wheel next to me in the studio, I cannot make their pots. Their pots are their pots. But so that's from the pottery perspective. But I wanted to go back to the AI and the generation of artwork for AI. I have gotten backgrounds from AI because I know specifically what I want to do for a cover. But the bottom line is I take that over to my illustrator and I tell him what it is that I want to add to it, what it is that I don't like about it. And there are ways for him through his digital work and his craft that he has perfected that can take that piece, give me exactly what I want. And there's the human aspect of it, instead of just the rote, if I make me something that is whatever. And you don't get the same, I can tell you because I have tried it, you don't get the same thing twice. You don't get the same thing twice exactly the way that you want it. It has to be modified where the art is concerned. If the background is one way and I need to move something, I tell it to move it to a specific spot. It doesn't do it. And if it comes back to me with the right spot, the background is changed. So it's not something that I believe can be used effectively yet. I'll say yet because I do believe what Rich said, that there will be other aspects of this that will come to life as it goes through its renditions or whatever they're doing with this. But I'm a firm believer that creativity is something that each one of us is gifted with, and it is our responsibility to use it to the best of our ability without the help of AI.
I fully support that. Matt, I want to give you a chance to have the floor. I just want to bounce very quickly off what Teresa's saying, because I think something that is a very interesting topic is when you talk about craft. And I think very often we label art as a purely psychological experience, but we don't always think of it as a physical discipline. But I think anybody who has participated in writing or visual arts or music, there is an aspect of the physical discipline of craft. And what that means in the creation of art, in understanding fundamentals and then learning the rules so you can break them. And like that is an expression of yourself. And worth, I think, a worthwhile part of this discussion. But Matt, I want to give you a platform for your thoughts. Go for it.
Yeah, yeah, beautifully said. Thank you. And I actually I want I want to bounce this off. Being exposed to like the visionary art scene, right? We might be familiar with. Well, I know we have up at the top like Alex Gray and Allison Gray, and then we have um, swaths of all different artists, right? And many of them delve into the psychedelic. And when you go so far into the psychedelic, then it becomes a thing for it becomes a genre in and of itself, right? But someone like myself, I look at that and I wonder what's the meaning within that? Like it's great. It is great physical effort and it is great. Um, you take a lot of skill to get in to be able to do that, right? And people can definitely feel it. I think there's also a different resonance tying this back to AI generated art and meaningful, like human art, right? I see I see these two different camps too. Like when you say, oh, it's all subjective, oh, art, oh, AI can create anything, it can create all these images or whatever. You're coming from a very subjective viewpoint, right? Whereas on the other side, we have this human creativity that's special, that is inspired. And Joseph, as you so aptly put, the meaning of inspiration to breathe life into something, to breathe that there actually is a source, that there actually is, there's meaning and aliveness and a spirit that is a priori to our human conceptions, that we're the vessel for that to come through, right? That has a very, very different resonance and a very different flavor. And speaking for myself and people I get to encounter through my art, it's it's a joy and a blessing when people spot things within the art that I didn't even intend for them to be in there. It is the coolest thing. It's like, wow, I didn't even intend to put that there, but it adds to this narrative in the art. And then you have a conversation, and then you have the emotional investment in the art, and you have these wonderful moments of awe. And I guess that's really what I'm getting at too, is we're talking about that, and I know I'm like leapfrogging from a number of different points here, but but we're spending a lot of time talking about the object, but not you know, the inspiration and the awe and what's happening inside of our brains, right? What's happening inside of our beings, which is really what we're looking for when we talk about art, like high art. To who was it talked about? I think Brian was the one who talked about high art, made that comment, right? Is we're looking for these vital moments of awe, these vital moments of wonder, right? So that passes from that source through us into the art to the eyes and ears and all the senses of another person. There's a transmutation that takes place that you really, I would argue, can't replace.
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring that up. And Joseph, I want to get your thoughts on this. And so I'm hoping you can leapfrog off what I'm about to present is the idea of the participation in art by the person viewing it or experiencing it. I think is an understated part of the process. And I think something that we are seeing in the proliferation of AI generated amalgamations of music and writing and visual art is this decaying of media literacy, the ability for people of varying generations to be able to critically analyze and think about what it is that they're seeing beyond how it references themselves. And I think related to that is, I think when you hear non-creative people talk about creative folks, they say, I don't even know how you're able to do that. Brian, you mentioned that struggling with not that you're not a creative person, that's not what I'm trying to say, but that's struggling with like, I have this thing in my head and I don't know how to tell the prompt to get what I am seeing in my head. And I think something that is becoming incumbent on us as creative people in this time is, I think, a turning point or a turning of the page where how can we as a creative community help teach media literacy in a world where the people with all the power and money do not want that to be spread around. What they want is they want consumers who will buy the easiest, cheapest made product versus the art. How do we help teach media literacy as a community rather than gatekeeping it in this moment of being like, only we can define and understand art? How do we share that? Joseph, I want to hear your thoughts.
The thing of media literacy, I do want to touch on that, because media literacy to me is the equivalent of going into a grocery store and saying, "Can you give me a good bottle of wine?" You know, my beloved wife, partner, and princess, Susan, and I, we won't spend more than $11 for a bottle of wine. Because when we start spending $20, $25 for a bottle of wine, we get headaches. There's a real good break right there. We're not going to do it. Okay, it's real easy. However, you give me a good scotch, you know, a good Highland scotch. I don't care how much it costs. I want some. That's it. It's what I've been educated, you know, and that I think is the thing. Media literacy is dependent on the education of the consumer. You were saying that the market really wants everybody to go, yeah, that's great, I love it. And that's why we have majority of films coming out are superhero films, because they're amazingly cheap to make and they're real easy. It's all blue screen, like the one behind me, you know. But I want to get to something Matt was talking about, transcendence. And transcendence, because we have people here, Clarabelle and Matt, who are familiar with mythic reality, mythic concepts. Transcendence is what happens when the God touches you. It's what happens when you taste the wafer and the wine, okay? How many people on this call have cats? What is this? The cat walked away from Kyle over to Matt? Amazing. That cat is teleporting.
Yeah, buddy. Yeah, that's our Ryan. Our little Prince boy.
My dog just barked at me.
Brian, I believe you mentioned that you're a musician.
I am, and actually I was going to use a parallel there. But so instead of art, let's look at music and look at pop music. And if you like pop music, I'm sorry, but AI could outdo most pop music that's there. Country music, pop music. Yeah, it's not going to do, again, the high art music, but it can easily compete with the drivel of Sabrina Carpenter or whatever like that in the market without breaking a sweat if AI would sweat. You know what I mean?
But the thing I wanted to get to, that is quite correct. Majority of music that's on the pop charts comes out of a factory in Sweden.
Anyway.
But the thing was, and I think there may be some other musicians here, there are times when I am playing, when I'm gone. I'm not there anymore. Susan can tell immediately because the quality of my playing changes dramatically. I stop working at what I'm doing, and it's, you know, you could say it's in the hands, whether I'm on the guitar, the clarinet, the piano, whatever. I'm not there anymore, and it's flowing and it's beautiful. And I've said to her many times, she'll come in and she'll say, "That was amazing. What was that? If you didn't have a recording going, you're never going to hear it again, because I have no clue." And if you watch really high-level professional musicians, performance, there are points in time, Keith Jarrett does this all the time, where he's just, all of a sudden he's gone. Okay. Paul DeLuca is the same way. You know, Al Di Meola, they're gone. You can tell they're not on the stage anymore. Yeah. Something's doing something. I don't care if you get an AI that can do 3D printing or have robotic hands, you're never going to get that.
Yeah.
I'm willing to bet that, Teresa, when you're, I'm going to use the term sculpting. If that's incorrect, let me know. When all of a sudden your hands are just doing stuff and you're like, whoa, this is amazing. I'll have the same experience when I'm writing. I will be banging out the keys and all of it. I'll just, where the did that come from? My God, I would never have gotten that. That was, whoa, and I'm just shaking my head. Susan's going, what is it? Let me read this to you when I'm done. That is the spark. AI may be a great teacher because a lot of what I'm hearing from people is they're using it for a preliminary, a background, a drop, a test. It may be a great teacher, but I believe the aspect of art that makes it art is when the creator transcends the teacher, when the student goes beyond what the teacher is capable of. When I've taught, and I've had a student who came up with something I could never have come up with, that was it. I had done my job. They're going to contribute because my contribution is them. And I apologize. John, you have your hand up. We're going to have to close soon, but if I may, Kyle, please, John.
Mine is real quick. In the early days of when the artistic AI stuff was available to the public, there's a lot of forums I was on, like design forums, where people would come in and ask, what is this image called? Or what is this style? Like, how would you describe this? They were clearly there looking just for the prompt words to use. Like, I want to replicate this. And I don't know what they were making in the end, but there was like a genuine interest to like what that is. Like, these were like not so much famous pieces of art, but they were definitely like interesting and different. And so what is missing from all this is education and access to the materials in schools or wherever to work with these things and to see what you can create. So I think if people were more exposed to it more, at any point in their life, they would probably be more inclined to try and create it themselves first, physically, um, before just relying on AI to do it. But that could be the only thing they have access to for whatever their means are. Um, but there are people out there who are generally interested in how the art is created and want to understand it more. They just need to be educated better.
So I think there's also a meta at play. There's actually a bunch of meta at play, but one of the meta here is right now AI is being run at a loss leader. So everybody and its brother can use AI, but if the bubble bursts, it's not going to be available for $20 or $60 or $100 a month. And so a lot of this fear gets unrealized because they don't have, nobody's going to pay, what's ChatGPT Pro, like $600 a month? It's like, no, sorry. It's just going to not be there. And I think that's important in the long run, is that, as an economist, I look at the world that way too. It may just burst, and I don't want it to burst because I'm using the low end. But if it does, it's going to pull away a lot of this that's creating this fear, and it's going to be in the commercial world.
Yeah. So we are coming close to our closing time. Joe is going to close us out, but before we go, I just want to give a few final thoughts. First off, thank you everyone who is part of this. I wish we could sit around a real round table and talk about this for hours, because I feel like we absolutely could. But I think that despite all the fear and anxiety that I know I experience when I think about art and AI and the push for this technology, I think there is, especially after talking to all of you, a lot of hope. I think that one of the simplest questions is, who is AI art for? Versus, I think that's a very easy answer versus a much more difficult question is like, who is art for? Who is art for is a very broad, subjective topic, but who is AI art for is a very, very closed topic where I think it's for the money people. And so in that, I think there is truth and hope, and that art is more elemental than any one economic system. It's more elemental than any one market. And I think that this is going to prove itself in the free market of ideas, where as this sort of like horseshoes back around, people will see real human art on the street where it's not paid for, and they will be moved by it, and it will prove its own value beyond any sort of money, and it will prove its own relevance simply by existing. And so to Clara's, I think, very relatable fear of new technology, don't be afraid to adapt, but always make sure that your art is yours. Use this moment. I know for me, whenever I see all this AI generated amalgamations, out of spite, I want to make more art. I want to prove that there is something human and real in it, just because it's like in the vacuum of seeing something that a computer sort of amalgamated out of a bunch of images. I'm like, okay, now I want to draw more, because if that's what that can do, what can I do? So let the spite inspire you. Keep making art. Keep sharing media literacy. Teach people. Don't gatekeep, and try to lift each other up with your own art. And Joe, I will let you close us out.
Thank you, Kyle. I won't speak for everybody, but I'm going to anyway. This has been a truly wonderful and amazing session. I've learned stuff, and I'm arrogant enough to actually believe that when I've learned something, magic has occurred, because I'm going to touch the stone and pull out the sword all by myself. I hope you all have gotten as much out of this conversation as I have. And I desperately want you all to come back for whatever we do next. I think it's going to be something that Matt Mays will lead us in. Staring at you, Matt. So, folks, thank you all. I truly appreciate the conversation. I truly appreciate the time you've devoted to this and your words. Can't wait to get this one rendered and put out there on YouTube and Facebook and all the other places. It'll take me about a month to do it, because I'm slow. But good evening, one and all. You've been watching Roundtable 360. Tonight's conversation was AI and art's future. And you got it from artists who've been using AI. Can't get any better than that. Good night, all. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching Roundtable 360, where creatives from diverse fields and across the globe gather to discuss what's relevant, irrelevant, serious, and fun. Roundtable 360 is brought to you by Northern Lights Publishing. Our shows are taped the last Thursday of every month at 1:30 p.m. Hawaiian time, 4:30 p.m. Mountain Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, 12:30 a.m. London Time, 1:30 a.m. CEST, and whatever time that converts to wherever you are. Please join us. Get your invite at http://nlb.pub/roundtable. See you next time, and until then, stay safe and well.